Hello again. Hi everyone. I'm going to get started pretty quickly today. This is probably going to take up the full hour. My name is Garrett. Once again, I'm the brand ambassador and sommelier at Zaca Mesa Winery. I am joined again by my lovely wife behind the camera, who will be directing and writing down any questions that come in, and I will answer them as we go through tonight's tasting. Tonight I'm going to do kind of a basics of how to blind taste. Blind tasting is not only used for sommeliers as a test, but it's also used in everyday winemaking. Our winemaking team will use blind tasting to pull samples from barrels, whether it's blends or single varietal bottlings, and have someone pull them. They'll taste through it blind, so they can go in without a preconceived notion and decide which lots go into which bottling and which bottlings are going to be which barrels are going to be blended and what goes into single varietal bottling. So blind tasting has multiple applications. If I was to get really in depth and go through every part of blind tasting, this would be a 5-6 part series. But I'm just going to try to go into the most basics of blind tasting. Maybe you can learn a couple of new tricks to show at your next blind tasting party when all this is over. But a couple announcements. Again, we have our $5 shipping on any 3 or more bottle order. You can that's still running. And schedule-wise, this Wednesday we have the last tasting of the month, which is our 2016 Chapel G Syrah. Also, with any 3 or more bottle purchase, you could set up a private tasting with myself. Just purchase our wine on our website, zacamesa.com, or email me, Garrett, at zacamesa.com. So either way, you can order. So without further ado, let's get started. So just some basics of blind tasting and a couple things that will help kind of narrow down where certain wines are coming from. Excuse me. Sorry, guys. All right, there we go. Sorry about that, guys. So, first it helps to know, where certain characteristics of certain areas. And one of the biggest factors that goes into how a wine is going to turn out is where it's grown. So the climate or terroir. In front of me I have 3 different wines. One is a Pinot, one is a Syrah, one is a Cab. I don't know which one is which. I had my wife pour these, but I wanted to do these 3 specific wines because these are kind of 3 single varietal, kind of classic varietals that are very different from one another. So I think this will help with kind of learning some basics. But right off the bat, two big factors that go into how a wine comes out is the climate. So you have cool climate, warm climate. Cool climate is going to tend to be a little higher in acid, a little lower in sugar. And again, all the stuff I'm going to talk about tonight is not black and white. There's always a gray area in between. Depending on the winemaker's style or preference and where the grapes come from, every little thing, the yeast that's used will have a different effect on the wine. So what I'm talking about isn't black and white. There's a gray area in between, but this is how it's structured when I was learning how to blind taste. So again, cool climate, warm climate. Cool climate, you're going to have typically a little higher acid, a little lower sugar levels. So typically with lower sugar, you're going to have lower alcohol wine. So right off the bat, when you're blind tasting, if you have a wine that seems to have a little bit lower alcohol, and has higher acid, you're going to kind of narrow down, where that wine is coming from. You're going to know it's coming from a cool climate. Warmer climate is going to have higher sugar levels and lower acid levels. So you have the opposite effect. So typically higher sugar, you're going to get a little bit higher alcohol. So that's one indicator, as well as a lower acid profile. And basically what that means when separating from New World wines and Old World wines, typically wines that come from a cooler climate are going to be a little more earth driven. So they're going to have more of those secondary characteristics. So, more earth and spice are going to be the dominant characteristics. Whereas in a warmer climate, wines tend to be a little more fruit dominant. So a little more fruit forward. Most of the color that goes into wine comes from the skins, and a lot of actually the flavor and aromas come from the skins. So certain varietals will have thicker skins, like Cabernet Sauvignon, and certain varietals, like Pinot Noir, will have thinner skins, and that'll help decipher between two different wines. Right there is right on the color. So when you're blind tasting, there's three parts to it. There's the sight, which is the color, the nose, which is smelling the wine, and then the tasting part. So tasting part's obviously the funnest. First, when you go into climates, it's broken down into 4 categories. You have cool climate, moderate climate, warm climate, and hot climate. So those are the 4 different categories that climate is broken down to. So again, typically wines from a New World, which is the United States, South America, New Zealand, Australia, those are considered New World. Old World is going to be Europe-based producers, so France, Italy, Spain, Germany, those are considered Old World. So the 3 parts, we'll start with sight. So the first thing you're going to notice in wine is the clarity. So is there sediment? Is there signs of bubbles or gas? Typically, one indicator, if there's sediment in the wine, if it's not an older wine, that can mean that it's non-filtered. Some older wines that are that have been aged for a longer period of time will have sediment because the sediment starts to build up over time. In white wines, you can still have sediment. Those are called tartrates, and they're like these little kind of salt crystals almost. And that could be from non-filtering or a wine that was not cold stabilized. So you can still have some sediment in white wine. Some signs right off the bat that you can tell aging or oak usage. So in white wines, if a wine has a darker kind of golden to amber color, that could be a sign of aging or oxidation. That wine could have been aged in some type of oak, or also it could be an older white wine. The other the big thing that people always look at is the tiering or the drops. So an indicator of alcohol is the little drops that go down the side of the glass. So for this wine, wine number 1, just looking at the drops, they're much thinner and much faster. So what that means is it's probably a lower alcohol wine. When the drops are thinner and faster, that means lower alcohol. And then when I look at wine number 2, these drops are much slower, much thicker. So 2 big differences between wine 1 and wine 2 right away is those little teardrops, which again is a sign of alcohol. So I could probably right off the bat, I could say wine number 1 is probably going off of what we just talked about, is coming from a cooler climate, and wine number 2 is probably from a warmer climate. Do you have a question?
80 Pro asked, are those called legs?
Yeah, legs or tear, same thing. Teardrops or legs. Another question? Okay. So after we look at the wine, when we look at wine number 1, it's always good to have a white surface and good lighting. So the white surface helps reflect through the wine, so you can see any sediments or impurities. Also, you get a complete look at the color. Another sign of aging is called rim variation or bricking, and what that means is the wine will be darker in the center and then lightens up as it gets closer to the edge of the glass, and that is one sign of a wine that is a little more aged. So I'm going to go through sight with all three of these wines, and then we'll move on to nose. So just looking at the wine, you always want to use a nice polished glassware. Glassware is super important. Again, with a nice white backdrop, you hold the glass at about a 45-degree angle, and that's where you're going to get the best sight. So wine number one is a lighter garnet color. Not a lot of rim variation. There's a little bit of rim variation, but not very much. And again, has the thinner and faster teardrops. Wine number two, much more rim variation in this one. Darker center, it's starting to lighten up towards the edge. No sign of sediment. And then wine number three, this is a darker, we're getting closer to purple. A lot of staining on the glass, which is one sign of a darker pigment grape, as well as it could be from the extraction process during the winemaking. And we have pretty thick, slower drops, not as much as wine number two, but the drops are definitely thicker and slower than wine number one. All right, so right off the bat, wine number one, we're probably looking at a cooler climate. Wine number two, we're getting closer to warm and hot, and wine number three is probably a moderate to warm climate. Moving on to nose. So when it comes to smelling the wine, that's a huge part. It can be, your nose is attached to your palate. So smell, is one of the main parts of blind tasting. So first off, there's a few flaws that you can have in wine. I'll kind of go over some of the main ones that you may run into. The first one's called TCA. Some people call it corked. Like if you ever gone to a restaurant or a tasting room, they're like, oh, the bottle's corked. This is a flaw that happens in natural corks. It can range between 1% to 3% typically, depending on the producer in bottlings, and it's from natural cork. This flaw will smell kind of like wet cardboard or a soggy basement. It can be very predominant and really strong, or it can be very light and minute. So if you smell that, definitely send your bottle back if you're at a restaurant and get a new one because there's a flaw with it. Another flaw is called VA, which is volatile acidity, and this is kind of a vinegary note in the wine, and it's pretty pronounced when you come across it, but it can happen. So when you start to smell, first thing you want to notice is the intensity. Are the aromatics really big, or the aromatics lighter, or right in between? You can also pick up some of the aging in the smell. Is the fruit underripened? Is the fruit fresher? Is the fruit oxidized, dried? So this is where you're going to start picking up some of the fruit characteristics as well. And the fruit on this wine is a little more underripened, and the fruit profiles fall into a few different categories. So you have citrus fruits, apple, stone fruits, tropical fruits, and melon. Under the citrus fruits, you have your lemon, your lime, grapefruit, orange. In apple, you have the different colors. You have green apples, yellow apples, red pears, red apples. Tropical fruits are going to be pineapple, mango, papaya, and then you have melons, which are cantaloupe and honeydew. So these are kind of the different categories of fruit that the wine will fall under. This is for white wines. For red wines, you're going to get more you get red fruit characteristics, blue fruit characteristics, or black fruit characteristics. So fruit characteristics on wine number one. It's going to be more cranberry, pomegranate, a little cherry. And again, these are under-ripened, so you need that adjective with the fruit characteristics. Wine number 2. So wine number 2 is a little more ripened. These are almost kind of a jammier, over-ripened fruit, and more of, we're looking at black and red fruit. So blackberry, boysenberry, black cherry, raspberry. And then wine number 3. The fruit's going to be a little more oxidized, which kind of tells me this wine's pretty, it's pretty old. It's got some aging to it. And we're looking at more like dried cranberry, a little dried blackberry, and black cherry. So once you go through the fruits, then you got to move on to the non-fruit characteristics. So non-fruit characteristics are going to be floral, vegetal, herbal, spices, and earth and mineral tones. So when you're doing a formal blind tasting, you have to go through each one of these categories. And I'm going to kind of go through these kind of briefly and just give you some kind of generic descriptors that go with these categories. So floral, for white wine, you have yellow floral and white floral notes, which is for yellow, daisy. White is jasmine, honeysuckle. For red, you have roses, violets, lilac. And again, we're looking at fresh floral notes or dried floral notes. With spices, you have white pepper, black pepper, baking spices. And then one of my favorites is these are non-organic notes, which is one main one is petrol, which is like the gasoline, and there's certain Rieslings from Germany that will have this characteristic. And one of my favorite all-time characteristics is the plastic pool toy, and this is synthetic plastic basically. And then you'll also have some aromatics from the fermentation process. So you have malolactic fermentation, which is that kind of creamier, buttery note that you get in some Chardonnays. You have the carbonic, which kind of gives it this fresh, almost kind of like bubblicious kind of note on the fruit. And then lees contact, stirring on the lees, and that's kind of a yeasty, kind of doughy characteristic. All right. So I'm going to go through the nose on all three of these. So again, fruit, a little more underripened, cranberry, these are red fruits. Not a whole lot of non-fruit characteristics. There's a little bit of kind of wet potting soil, a little bit of white pepper. But for the most part, this is a nice kind of more fruit forward style wine, which is telling me this is probably going to be a more New World wine. Wine number 2, a little more kind of tobacco and spices. There's some vanilla, which is telling me there's probably some oak profile on here, a decent amount of new oak. And wine number 3. Again, this definitely has some oak profile on there. Has this kind of like dried leather, a little meatiness to it, bacon fat. And I apologize because I'm gonna rush through these pretty fast because I only have a limited amount of time. And I want to make sure that any questions that come in I can get to, so feel free to shoot in questions as I go through this. So now that we've gone through sight and smell on these 3 wines, wine number 1, again, we're probably looking at a cooler climate wine. It's got more red fruit characteristics, not a whole lot of secondary notes to it on the earthy notes, kind of potting soil, a little bit of white pepper. Wine number 2, we got more of the tobacco, a little bit of olive, So there's some, also has this kind of like green pepper, which is, gives you some of the vegetal notes. Definitely a little more, richer. The fruit profile is jammier, which is telling me this is probably from a warmer to hot climate. And wine number 3, is definitely showing a good amount of aging on it. It has this dried leather, a little more earthy spice to it. Wine number 2 and 3 definitely have a decent amount of new oak on it. I think wine number 2 is probably have some American oak, and I'll go over the difference of French and American oak here in a second. And while wine number 1 is probably going to be aged in neutral oak. So talking about the 2 different types of oak, French and American, there's other types of oak as well, but French and American are the most common. French is going to give you more vanilla, dried baking spices, a little bit of cedar, sawdust. American oak, sometimes you get a little bit of caramel, vanilla extract, and while there's vanilla in American and French, the vanilla from American is a little more concentrated and rich. You can also get a little bit of dill and roasted coconut from American. So when blind tasting, if you pick up that roasted coconut kind of hint or dill, you're probably dealing with American oak. So going through wine number 1, number 2, number 3. Let's go to tasting. My favorite part. And when tasting, you want to give it a good, sip and slurp. That really kind of coats your whole palate, introduces some oxygen, so you can really release those aromatics and the flavor profile. Also, you want to give it a good swirl. This opens everything up. So flavor profile, it matches the aromatics pretty closely. The tannin profiles is pretty low. Acid is more medium plus to even high. And the way to detect acidity is the way your mouth salivates. Wines that are really dry and tannic, they really suck the moisture out of your mouth. Wines that have a little bit higher acid to them make your mouth salivate. So this wine, again, I get a lot of salivation on my palate, which is telling me it's, coming from a cooler climate. Fruit profile, more red fruits, cranberry, pomegranate, cherry, has that little bit of earthiness on the palate. It also has some mineral tones to it. Mineral tones can be whetstone, limestone, chalk, flint. So I know it's kind of, when you hear mineral tones, it's kind of weird to name out different types of rock. But really, if you have any of these and smell them, they do have different notes to them. I don't suggest licking a rock, but if you really want a good in-depth lesson on how different rocks taste, go for it. And a lot of these notes, how do you know what blood orange tastes like, or what dried violets smell like if you've never smelt them or tasted them? So a lot of this, you have to try all these things to really expand your flavor profile. Without tasting or smelling these things, you're not going to be able to pick them up in wine. So one thing I suggest for people that want to get into this more and take it more seriously is finding all these things and tasting them and smelling them. There's actually really good smell kits that you can buy online that have over 100 different characteristics. They are kind of expensive for the big ones, but you can find some of the smaller ones that are under $100. But you can get the full one with like all the different scents and aromatics for I think they're range around $200 to $300. But if you really want to get everything, that's the way to do it. So wine number 2. And the reason why I do the at the end. That's the way to detect alcohol. So when you do that breath in and you feel more cool air in your chest, that's a sign of higher alcohol. The deeper that coolness goes into your nose and then to the back of your throat, that can help you detect alcohol levels. So, you know, like if you ever taken a shot of vodka, which I'm sure most people have, or some type of hard alcohol, you know, it gives you that kind of burn menthol feel. That's the same thing I'm kind of looking for, is, you know, the alcohol amount. So that tannin profile in this wine is more medium plus. It's definitely bigger than wine number one. Flavor profile is actually pretty heavy on the spice side. I get a lot of, I think there's definitely some American oak on this wine. It has some of that roasted coconut and dill characteristic to it. It's actually really nice. Seems like this wine's had some aging to it, and it's come together pretty nicely. Fruit profile, definitely on the red and black side. So black cherry, raspberry, but the fruit is more jammy. So again, probably coming from a warmer climate. And wine number three, this is the biggest wine as far as tannin profile between the three. This one is really meaty. Most of the fruit is kind of fallen off, which again is a sign of aging. More leather, kind of cured meats. It has a little bit of gaminess to it, a lot more spice. Probably has a good amount of new French oak on the aging on this wine as well. And again, with the alcohol content, it's probably coming from a more moderate to warm climate. Do you have a question?
Are these all Zaca Mesa wines, which I know you...
Yeah, so these are not all Zaca Mesa wines. I'm sure there is a Zaca Mesa wine in here. The choices that I gave my wife, there was Zaca Mesa in there, and I told her to pick one. So, and going through these and now tasting them, I think I know which one is the Zaca Mesa wine. But there is, again, I have Pinot, Cab, and Syrah in here. You can probably guess which one the Zaca is, in no particular order. But I wanted to do those three varietals because they are so different from each other. All these wines are going to be New World. I didn't have any Old World wines that I was willing to risk parting with at this time. A lot of the Old World European wines I have are a little more pricey, so I'll save that for another of my tastings, but these are going to be all New World wines. Another question? So, to really learn and to know, how to decipher which wine is which, it's a process of elimination. So when you're tasting and you're smelling, before you start picking what it is, you start picking what it's not. So as you go through a wine, I know this isn't, Cab, I know this isn't Zinfandel, I know this isn't Syrah because of, this and this reason. So you can start narrowing down what varietals it is. That's the most important part, is to eliminate and then narrow it down to 2 or 3 possible varietals, and then pick the one that you believe it most likely is. So I'm going to go through some common characteristics of each one of the varietals. So some common characteristics of Cabernet Sauvignon. It's going to have a little bit more firm tannin, so a little fuller tannin profile. Color-wise, it's going to have a more deep ruby to even some almost purple hues to it. Flavor, fruit characteristics, going to be more on the red and black side, so black cherry, raspberry, blackberry, black currant, Cab tends to have kind of a tobacco or sweet tobacco characteristic to it, and olive. So olive kind of usually is kind of a dead giveaway. Syrah is going to be more on the black and blue fruit typically. Sometimes you can get a little bit of red fruit in there. More floral. You will tend to get kind of more like dried violets, even sage. More medium to medium plus, so again, more full tannin profile. You can have some meatiness to it, which means like bacon fat or cured meats. Also, a lot of times Syrah, especially when it ages, it has this kind of dried leather note to it. And then Pinot Noir, the lightest of those three varietals, very low tannin profile. It's got a lighter ruby color to it, a lighter garnet color to it. More red fruit on the characteristics, and kind of has this like wet earth and mushroomy in some cases note, and more white pepper. Question?
What's the best wine movie for everyone to watch?
Definitely the Somm series, Somm 2 Into the Bottle and Somm 3 are excellent movies. The first Somm movie was one of the first movies I watched when I started getting into wine, and that really lit a fire underneath me to learn more and want to get into doing the sommelier certification. What?
Where can you find them?
You can find all those movies. They used to be on Netflix, Somm and Somm Into the Bottle, but they removed them from Netflix. And actually, Somm has its own application now. I believe it's Somm TV, which is like a streaming service for people that are huge wine junkies, and wine and food junkies. And you can also purchase them or rent them on Amazon. So a few different ways. So now that I've kind of tasted and smelled through these wines, I hope you guys have a bottle of wine in front of you. If there's any other questions specifically on any little tidbits and little ways to pick things up, blind tasting takes hours and hours and hours and hours of practice to learn. I'm cramming, I'm trying to cram some basic information of blind tasting. Again, in order to really learn it and get in depth, it takes a lot of time and a lot of practice. But I just wanted to kind of give some basics into it. So again, cooler climate, lower alcohol, higher acidity, warmer climate, higher alcohol, lower acidity. Typically, old world wines are going to be more earth-driven, mineral-driven. New world wines are going to be more fruit-driven. So, just a couple of things that can help eliminate, certain varietals right off the bat. So, another question?
Try It Online says, we are enjoying the 2016 Zaca Pinot Noir, and it has a nice rich color. How did that happen?
Yeah, so it's a 16, so the color is going to be, pretty vibrant. Pinot Noir color itself is going to be a more garnet color, and reds fall into three categories of color. It's garnet, ruby, and purple. So, and there's some variation in between those three, but Pinot is definitely on the more ruby side. It's still red, it's still intense, but it's a different hue. And again, a lot of the color can come from the extraction, how long the skins are soaked during fermentation or before fermentation. Is there filtering, non-filtering? So there's a lot of different variations, and that's why I said at the beginning that what I'm saying isn't black and white. There's a lot of gray area in between. You can have new world producers that make their wine in an old world style, so it can be kind of deceiving. You can get some new world producers that come off as old world, and vice versa. You can have old world producers that some of their wines may come off new world. So there's no exact black and white answer to it. There's a lot of gray area in wine. But again, these are just some of the basic instructions when it comes to learning. Another thing that I love is the flavor wheel, the descriptors wheel. You can get this on Wine Foley, and it has all the different fruit characteristics, non-fruit characteristics, floral notes, vegetal notes, and these are great. And on the back, it has all the different flaws. So when you are practicing or you doing a blind tasting party, you can have this out to help kind of find different characteristics. You know, if you have something on the top of your head, you just can't quite, get it, you can look through this and find it. Another thing that I use is a blacked out wine glass. This guy's completely blacked out, so you can't actually see the color. So this really helps you to study and focus on the taste and aromatic. So this is really kind of strengthening your sense of smell and taste without actually seeing the color of the wine. These are great to use. Question?
Are you gonna say which wine?
Yes, I'm getting there. Sorry.
And where can you find the glassware? And maybe the wines.
Yeah, so I'm actually doing a glassware demo in May as one of my tastings. So you can go on our website, zacamesa.com, and have our full calendar for May up. So I'll be kind of going over the different shapes. But the glassware I have in front of me, this one in the center is actually the one we use in our tasting room at the winery. And these two are a couple new ones I just got. The producer. I don't have the producer in front of me, but I also use Riedel glasses quite a bit. Those are really solid. They're a little more pricey, but really great glassware. The style of these glasses are a little more universal. It's kind of a classic Bordeaux style, but with a little wider base, so it really gets things kind of spinning around and with a little tighter mouth to help concentrate the aromatics. Let's do the wines before I run out of time.
Where can you get the wheel?
The wheel, Wine Foley. I actually got this one on Amazon, but Wine Foley is a great website as well. But you can order these guys on Amazon. I think they're like $10, $15. The blacked out wine glasses, also Amazon. And this one came in a 4-pack, and I think it was $30 or $40, a little more pricey. All right, so wine number 1. So I said, it's lighter red fruit, higher acidity, lower alcohol, a little more kind of potting soil, a little more earthiness to it, white pepper, not a lot of new oak on there. So I believe wine number 1 is the Pinot Noir. Wine number 2. Wine number 2, more full body, darker color. There is some rim variation. Oh, sorry. So wine number 1, I believe the Pinot is probably 3 to 5 years old. Wine number 2, a little more full bodied, darker in color, with that kind of dill and roasted coconut and, higher oak profile. From a warmer climate. This is going to be the Cabernet Sauvignon, and I would say it's probably 5 to 6 years old. And then wine number 3, so process of elimination. If I'm saying 1 is Pinot, 2 is Cab, then wine number 3 has got to be the Syrah, and this is going to be our Syrah. Now, which Syrah it is, I'm not too sure of, because we make 8 different Syrahs, so didn't nail up a specific one. As I was going through the tasting, this wine definitely has some aging on it. So I'm going to say, it's probably between 8 to 10 years old. And it's going to be our Mesa Reserve Syrah. So, want to show wine number 1, babe?
Pinot.
All right, wine number 1 is the Pinot Noir from Cambria Winery up in Santa Maria Valley. So this is a cool climate Pinot. Doesn't have the oak profile on here, but just knowing the producer, it's probably going to be neutral to a very limited amount of new oak. Also, a bit lower in alcohol, I think, between the other ones. But Cambria, fantastic local Santa Maria Valley producer. Does really great Pinot and Chardonnays. Wine number 2
is the Cab.
Wine number 2 is the Cabernet Sauvignon from Paso Robles from Vino Robles. 100% cab. It is a 2013 cab. And it is aged 32 months in new French and American oak barrels. So that's, when I was tasting it, I was, one of the most dominant characteristics in this wine was the oak profile. Alcohol is above 15, so this tells you this is from a warmer to hotter climate. Vino Robles, which I have been to, actually worked there for a little bit, is it's pretty hot out there. It's on the east side of Paso, but a good cab. It's aged well, 2013. Sorry, the Pinot is 2015, if I didn't say that. And then, of course, wine number 3.
Zaca Mesa.
One of the best producers in the valley.
The best.
Zaca Mesa Winery. This is the 2011 Mesa Reserve. And, yeah, age 19 months in French oak. So I kind of, I have some inside, info on the Syrah. Definitely a great wine. 2011 is part of our library collection, and we started a library club that we hold and set back particular vintages that are special or of a certain wine, and we re-release them as part of this wine club. So if you are a club member or not a club member, you can add this on to your regular club membership or join our wine club and get into the library club, and you get awesome wines like this, our 2011 Mesa, which is aged great. And it's drinking really nice right now. Definitely a nice classic, meaty, earthy Syrah, a lot of spice, a lot of leather. Yeah. So, again, like I said at the beginning, I gave my wife an option. I have probably a little over 100 different bottles in our, wine collection. So, I did have some, knowledge of what it could possibly be. But these are 3, kind of classic New World examples. Pinot, Santa Maria Valley, Cab from Paso Robles, and the Syrah from San Ynez Valley. So this Wednesday coming up, I'll be doing our 2016 Chapel G Syrah. May 2nd, I will be live with Lamar from Wine Militia, so that should be fun, 5 o'clock. We've got our deal still running, 3 or more bottles. If you would like to order the 2011 Mesa, just email me. This is not on our website, so Garrett@zacamesa.com, and we can put a nice order of this guy together. It's ready to drink. Other than that, if there is no other questions, thank you everybody for watching. I know I just crammed a lot of information to a short period of time. I tried to do my best there, but let's do it again. I think next time we'll do white wines. I kind of wanted to do reds because in most blind tastings people seem to focus on red wines. But actually white wines are my favorite to blind taste because to me they're harder. Just my personal preference. White wines are harder to decipher than reds. But we'll do this again Wednesday. I'll see you guys on Wednesday. This Wednesday 5 o'clock, and then again Saturday. Go on our website zacamesa.com to see our full schedule. And also again purchase 3 or more bottles and set up a private tasting with myself. And I can talk all about this and more in detail and bore you to death. Question?
No, everybody loves it, and they said thank you. And a lot of people were doing blind tastings with you of their own.
Oh, great! I'm glad you guys did that. Keep practicing. Even if you know the wine, just go through the color, go through the nose, go through the aromatics, go through the flavor profile. Just to help, heighten your senses, or if you have someone at your home, a spouse or, something that can paper bag them and surprise you and do it. There is a grid, an actual grid that is what you have to do for the sommelier certification, which is way more detailed than everything I just went into. If you go onto the Guild of Somm website, I believe they have the grid, so you can see all the very deep specifics. What I just went into is about 5% of what you actually have to name and go through in an actual, tasting, like if you're being tested.
They want to know when you got certified, how long you've been doing
I got certified back 2017, and I've been in the wine industry about 5 years. It was something that I wanted to do pretty quickly after I started working in wine. I was fortunate to work at a great winery as my first job and had a lot of help, and hung out with the right people that were doing the same thing. So to get into doing your sommelier certification, there's a lot of steps, and it's good to find other people that are like-minded and trying to do the same thing. Wine's very expensive, so in order to know these wines, you have to taste these wines, and in order to taste these wines, you have to purchase these wines, and they're not cheap. So it's good to have some other people that are also doing it, so you can study together. It's hard to do it all on your own. But check out the Somm documentaries, especially the first one. That gives an in-depth look at 4 guys who are preparing for their master exam, which is the highest level. And if you like that and you think that's awesome, then you can start taking the first step, which is doing your level 1 certification. Again, the stuff I went to is just kind of more of the fun. Hopefully you learned a couple things so you can impress your friends at your next blind tasting. But to really get in deep, there's a lot more details that are needed to take that step. But this was a little more of kind of fun basics into exactly the title, Basics of Blind Tasting. Any other questions?
Everyone just says thank you.
All right, thank you guys. Hopefully I'll see you Wednesday. Appreciate everybody watching. ZacaMesa.com. Check out our full schedule. If you have any questions after this broadcast, just email me, Garrett, Garrett, at Zaca Mesa. This will be posted on YouTube after the recording as well. So if you want to rewatch it, you can go onto YouTube, or this will be on our on here for the next 24 hours if you want to rewatch it, and because this was pretty fast. But thank you, everyone. Everybody stay safe.
Tomorrow's Brandon's birthday.
And tomorrow is my youngest daughter's first birthday, so wish her a happy birthday. My little nugget's turning 1. Take care, everyone. Thank you. Cheers.
I need to get it out to save it.
Did you post it?